You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for June 25th, 2021. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where after 604 continuous episodes, we can still say, without fear of contradiction, that both sides don't. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal. Hey, Blue Gal.
Hey, Driftglass, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Doing all right.
Yeah. Well, this
Friday?
came up today on Twitter a couple of times. First up, we waited to start recording today until the Derek Chauvin sentence was released.
It was, yes.
22 and a half years.
Yes, indeed.
But before it was released, a Fox News anchor asked,
Oh,
and
Lord.
you know, this
I
is
know.
John
I know.
Roberts on Fox News. Is there a number, some kind of magical number in there that can somehow miraculously satisfy Americans on both sides of the political aisle? Because
now think about that.
bipartisanship.
Think about that. What are the two sides of this guy murdered a guy?
Right.
Oh, it's the pro murder side. It's the pro
Wants
murder.
to be made happy and content and calmed by, so that they're not upset. I mean, this is the whole thing that's going on with the whole critical race theory bullshit.
Right.
You know, we can't upset white people who don't want to be that way, who think it's their privilege, absolute right, to not be upset by anything, including their own history.
Yes. Well, and that's the number one reason I'm still convinced after 604 episodes and many, many years of, well, decades now of blogging, that going back to good old Steve Gilliard, you know, the reason they hate us, the reason they really just can't stand us is that we keep pointing out, holding a mirror up to the right.
Yeah.
We keep doing that, and they just hate it. They fucking hate it. They have a very clear conception of who they are and what they are, what they believe, and through good times and bad, through administrations, from Bush to Obama to Trump, Clinton, and right on down the list, we just stand there patiently holding a mirror up to the Republican Party and its base and its leadership and say, this is who you are. This is what we see when we look at you. And they can't stand that. That's why nothing really comes as a surprise. Things surprise us when they escalate faster than we thought they would. But the idea that some asshole on the right is going to gin up some completely bullshit controversy over nothing and called critical race theory as if it's a real thing that's actually happening in the world. And of course, the right's going to get all spun up over it. And of course, all of your favorite allies on their podcasts are like, what the Democrats must do about this critical race theory controversy. They just buy right into it. And the entire...
Politico's had article after article without mentioning once that critical race theory is not taught in... Anywhere but law school.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the concomitant, well, once the right decides on the buzzword it's going to feed into the crazy idiots' skulls this week.
The brainwashing word.
The bulldozer comes out, and suddenly it's all over NBC, ABC, CBS, because they apparently can't help themselves. They can't just say, this is bullshit. This is calling people Marxists. It's calling them socialists. It's calling them anti-American. It's the same bullshit the right always pulls, and we're not going to fall for it. No.
Right.
Because that can never be the story. And so if you look across, all of our allies, all of our so-called allies are freaking out over why the Democrats suck at messaging. And how come Democrats are obsessed with defunding the police? Yeah. And I keep looking around for any piece of legislation anywhere that actually says that. And what they mean is the monster we created has been given another bone to chew on. And the Democrats, and we think you should react to it. And we're like, no, we don't want to react to it. We think it's stupid. We think people who believe this shit are stupid. We believe the leaders of the party are assholes and fascists, who are behaving with impunity because they know their people are stupid. And that's the mirror we hold up to you. And that's why, we piss everybody off, because it's not something that anyone wants to hear. And that's a big part of today's podcast later on, which is the weird way people talk about the Republican base.
Before we get rolling on other things, we certainly want to send our condolences and our hopes for healing to Surfside, Florida, and the tragedy that happened there. It's going to take them a while to find out how this happened and why. Apparently, there are many scores of people who are still unaccounted for, and that is so horrible. It's so maddening to know that that's happening to people, and we're thinking about you down there in South Florida.
Just out of the blue, a bolt from the blue. It is not.
Yeah. Well, the building was apparently sinking 2 centimeters a year, and that's a warning sign and so forth. But this was sudden, and it's terrifying. It's a nightmare. And again, we're just thinking of you folks down there.
And there's no political bucket into which to put
There's
it.
no political bucket to put this in. No,
it's a bunch of families.
Tragedy.
It's a bolt from the blue tragedy.
Yep.
That everyone can imagine happening to them, sort of.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I as far as I can tell, it's in the hands of the proper authorities, and FEMA got involved, and all the people that you would hope are doing what they need to do or doing what they need to do.
And this is when you need government to just work.
Yes.
To just work.
Kick into action and work, and not fuss around a lot.
Right. Right.
Now, time for an awkward transition.
Well, I wanted to make a comment too on something you said about holding up a mirror, because to me, and I maybe we'll get into this later, but to me, when you said that about holding up a mirror to the right, it does explain then why they flip on their own positions.
Yeah.
Why Laura Ingraham wants now to defund the military all of a sudden, because a military man made a statement that the United States military academies are universities and they want to learn stuff. And I'm a white guy and I want to learn about white rage, and I want to understand why American citizens invaded this building, the Capitol building. I want to understand why. I think we should investigate why. And so the only thing when you hold up a mirror to Laura Ingraham and her ilk that she can do is flip against that, even though she's pro-military and pro-Republican, the Republican line on defense spending and so forth. She has to flip.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the answer to all this defund the police bullshit, is you don't mean that. We never said that. And defunding the military, really? Who is the one who wants to keep America safe? Oh, well.
And that's when I, once upon a time, took up calling the GOP base reprogrammable.
Yeah.
I'm quite serious. That's literally, that's not a clever coinage that I just, threw off. If your computer at home once ran Adobe and then you uninstalled Adobe is gone from your machine. These people are programmed in a literal programmatic lines of code sense to think deficits are bad and we must get rid of them immediately, right up until a Republican becomes president. And then they are reprogrammed again. Their hard drive is wiped and they're reprogrammed to think deficits aren't so bad. Deficits don't really matter. It doesn't count. The military is a holy institution. Anyone who says anything about the military being bad
against our troops, how dare you? Yes.
Until, of course, Donald Trump came along and called them losers and suckers, and that caused a lot of people.
Or until John Kerry runs against George W. Bush, and then ha ha ha, you're a purple Band-Aid.
Right.
Yeah.
And the part of the Republican brain that would sense the fact that something radical has changed, that something has completely inverted, is just gone. And I've said this before on this very podcast. This is where liberals trip up. It's like, ha, I caught you doing a reversible thing. Yeah. There's no one at home upstairs to shame. They don't recognize the fact that the past exists at all or that they're responsible for it in any way. So there's no way to trick them or fool them or expose them into flipping or acknowledging anything, because they just keep lying. Like, oh, no, you don't understand. There's a basic linguistic misunderstanding here.
But that's a perfect segue into who we want to dedicate this show to.
Yes, it is. We want to dedicate this show this week to a gentleman named Ed Snodgrass. You all know Ed, good old Ed Snodgrass. He's a Republican. He's a Porter Township trustee in the great state of Ohio. And
your wife's birthplace, right?
Yes. My wife was born there. And she got out of there as fast as she possibly could.
I love Ohio.
Yeah. Ohio's got a lot going for it.
A liberal agrarian tradition that's going to come back.
Eventually. It will eventually come back.
Yes, it will.
Once the Republican Party is completely defeated and driven, onto the ash heap of history.
Well, and one of my favorite senators, Sherrod Brown, is from Ohio.
Yes, he is.
So,
but
currently,
currently Ohio is one of the many Republican-run states where Republicans are currently trying to ram through all kinds of despicable voter suppression and election nullification laws under the pretext of fighting what we at the professional left have always believed was non-existent voter fraud. Statistically irrelevant. Every study shows it. Bush administration studies show it just isn't there. It's 0.00005%. It accounts for nothing. Well, we here at the Professional Left podcast are big enough to admit when we're wrong. And we were wrong about this. Ohio does, in fact, have one verified case of voter fraud, which was carried out by none other than our dear friend, Ed Snodgrass, the Porter Township trustee who is admitted to forging his dead father's signature on an absentee ballot and then voting against himself. And you know what? He didn't vote either for Bernie Sanders as a write-in candidate or for Joe Biden. In fact, he and his dead father both voted for Donald Trump because he believed that his dead father voting for Trump was what his dead father up in heaven really wanted. So it was a holy thing. He was on a mission from God, Blue Gal. Now, the bad news for good old Ed, a friend of the pod, Ed Snodgrass, is that his Trump-loving father is not in heaven. But the good news for good old Ed is that sooner or later, we're sure he'll meet up with his father again in that other place.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Pretty sure that's going to happen.
Yeah, his confidence that his dad's in heaven is pretty endearing to him.
Yes,
but
it's adorable.
Voting for Trump for his ghost dad, unclear on the concept of voter fraud, and he's in trouble for it. So
and his stuttering, like, but that's what my dad would have wanted. Yeah. I'm just honoring his memory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meanwhile, OAN wants to execute people who put Biden in office. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mailbag, just for a moment. Indulge me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank the listener who sent us handmade F the GOP cards that when you open, they make a flushing sound.
Oh,
he made these. They were cute. F the GOP, and you open up, and it means flush. And a listener who sent us a piece of burnt wood he found. He found this piece of burnt wood, and he sent it to us as proof that burning the lifeboats can happen.
It can happen. They're wet. You can burn wet wood. You really can.
You can burn it.
Yeah.
Finally, a listener from Michigan who wrote us a lovely handwritten letter, which included the call for please have more like Ann Richards in Texas. And to that we say amen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So appreciate all of you writing in. Thank you. My birthday is next month.
It is.
I have to get a root canal, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's what your birthday donations will go toward my 50% copay for my root canal.
Well, and the hiring the two strapping men to hold you down during the root canal, because
I think they're going to, numb me up and take. Oh,
yeah, no. Dental science has advanced sufficiently.
I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the hit to my pocketbook, but because we have dental insurance, but
we do. Well,
dental insurance covers for root canal. When you get into the deep stuff, they only cover half or 40% or whatever. So it's going to be expensive.
We have a new sponsor coming up next week. Technically, it's dental insurance.
Technically, it's dental insurance. Is right. Yeah. And hopefully, Bernie Sanders is working hard to get number one, to reduce the Medicare eligibility age to 60, which would be awesome for you, Driftglass.
That'd be great. I just
and
want to
for
be
me,
able to.
Pretty soon, I'll be 58 this summer or next month.
Mm-hmm.
And then also include eyeglasses and hearing aids and dental, dentures. And I remember my aunt talking about that like 30 years ago when my grandmother was, they had to move and she moved across the street so she could provide care for them and so forth. And her saying, Medicare is great, but it doesn't cover the three things that seniors need most: hearing aids, eyeglasses, and dentures. And there was a study done I read this week too about dementia. And not just dementia, but also just losing cognitive ability as you age. And it said that one of the things that causes seniors to lose cognitive ability as they age is they don't get hearing aids and they don't get glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And it isolates them intellectually because they aren't hearing or seeing what's going on. And so the brain is not stimulated the way it would be if you could hear and see what was going on. I mean, it's pretty simple that you can improve cognitive outcomes by making sure seniors can hear and they can see.
Yeah.
And that just makes total sense. I mean, you wouldn't think you'd need a study, but the studies confirm that. So hopefully we can...
Depriving people of two of their senses actually has a cognitive impact on...
Right. And so maybe we can have better cognitive impacts on for seniors as we make it easier for them to hold on to those senses.
Well, I'm just looking forward to pulling that ladder up behind me, Blue Gal. That... like, screw you
all. To 60 and then nobody gets it.
Screw y'all. All socialism for me, but not for the assholes. Sorry.
There's plenty of people out there that feel that way, but we don't.
We know who they are. They're called
do
Republicans.
Not feel that way.
No, we if I could wave a magic wand and have Medicare for all, I would do it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I do not possess such a magic wand, so I will fight for what I can get and be happy when I get a quarter of a loaf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will not be satisfied with a quarter loaf, but I will not pretend that the situation has not improved at least marginally over the way it used to be, because it has. And if all of your celebrations are reserved for the future date when everything is exactly the way you want it, you will never celebrate anything ever because it's never going to happen.
And we've got a lot of fighting. We've got a lot of fighting to do ahead of us, but
we do. And
I want you to talk for a minute about this week being kind of weird in terms of the way the media talks about Republican voters.
That's the thing. I mean, the election is upon us, whether you like it or not. The midterms are right around the corner. And I cast a very wide net when I talk about Republicans. I'm interested in everything. I want to hear all sorts of people talk about this subject because I think it tells you a whole lot about them and the places where they're stuck and what they feel they can't talk about. And having just come out of, a writing project of many months duration with a committee where people are parsing words and they can never seem to find the right word because they're trained to have only think of things in three ways. And my job was to say, well, what about this? And, oh yeah, that's why you're the writer, because you can think of different ways of describing the phenomenon that's more accurate. I think it's interesting and weird to hear the way various people talk about the Republican base. For example, and these are just little things, but they just accrued over the week that I just went, if I had a podcast, I'd sure as hell talk about this. Like, wait a damn minute. And I woke you up at 3 a.m, which you did not appreciate.
No.
Said, honey, I have a topic for the podcast.
Yeah, right.
And you
Type it up.
is the fact that you are about to be murdered? Because that would be cool. At least I don't wake you up to quote Ayn Rand anymore.
Ayn Rand. I know. That's our running joke. Yeah. Let me read to you from the formerly unpublished works of Ayn Rand. Yeah.
That'll put you right to sleep.
That was after your youngest child's birthday when she was like 6.
Yeah.
Longest day of the year.
It works. It works better than 9 melatonins. So on Twitter this week, for example, Joy Reid of MSNBC.
Who we love.
But this week she scolded Fox News for, quote, hiding facts from their captive audience. And I thought, here's the problem with that. They're not captive. They're not. They have agency. They're grown-ass adults. There's 74 million of them. Well, a fraction of those watch Fox News all the time. They're not captive in any way. Captives are usually delighted when they are liberated from captivity. Fox News viewers will fight like hell to stay stupid and stay paranoid and stay
and then
angry.
You can prove they're not captive, Driftglass, because they moved to Newsmax and OAN when Fox isn't hard enough, going hard on Trump, going hard for Trump. Right?
But this is a way of shifting blame, frankly, away from the people who are gobbling up the lies to the people that are providing the lies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it is a sick symbiotic relationship, to be sure. But the idea that the audience is captive and Fox News is entirely guilty because they're hiding stuff from them is just bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
But it does tell you that we're going to go after the network and not the viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Because the viewers might be our viewers sometimes. We never attack the people who might buy toothpaste or dick pills from your network.
Right.
You go after the other network. And this week, almost in fulfillment of prophecy, because I talked about this last week. I talked about, it's weird that Charlie Sykes of the Bulwark podcast spent a long time scolding Democrats about being condescending. Towards those poor, deluded Republican voters, when really Charlie Sykes' entire fucking brand, since he got kicked out of the party, is to be condescending towards the same people.
Yeah.
And this week, because I do listen to everything, on the Lincoln Project podcast, Rick Wilson was scolding Democrats for being condescending towards Republican base. And I thought, that's weird, because I remember in 2017, or was it 18, Rick Wilson going on the Don Lemon show and making Don Lemon laugh by insulting the intelligence of Donald Trump and I'm quoting now, the credulous boomer rubes who made up the base of the GOP.
Wow.
The people that he used to tell racist lies to get them to vote against Barack Obama.
Yeah.
The people that paid for his house and paid for his plane and paid for his kids' orthodontia. Those people he loved laughing at and calling morons and inbred shitheads. If you think I got kicked off of Twitter for calling someone trash, you need to read Rick Wilson talking about Republican voters on Twitter.
On Twitter. It's unbelievable
various
how nasty
incidents,
he is allowed to be. Yeah.
Various incidents with your mama in a truck station bathroom, jerking, sucking, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it goes on. Yeah.
This is Rick Wilson, who this is in the middle of him scolding Democrats, because Democrats don't know how to do politics, Blue Guy. That's why you need the Lincoln Project, because only they will save the Republic, even though the entire history of the Lincoln Project is never delivering on anything they said they were going to do. Democrats suck at everything because we're condescending and we're policy wonks. We don't have a message. We need the Lincoln Project because their message, which is very clear, which is on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Republican voters are fucking idiots. And can you believe what they do in truck station bathrooms? And on Tuesday and Thursday, it's how dare Democrats condescend to these working class white people? And because they're talking to themselves, they think, there's no one out there noticing that we just pull this shit out of our ass, except for Driftglass, and we just block him.
We blocked him.
He's not a problem.
Done. Yeah, he's off Twitter, so we're all set.
And then I flip over and I watch Matthew Dowd on MSNBC,
who's now savior of the Republic, by the way.
He is.
He is personally appointed. He appointed himself savior of the Republic.
He's the best person. He is there's the glowing praise. Matthew Dowd is really a noble, decent, kind, honorable human being. Nobody gets it.
He was also noble when he was whining about the corrupt duopoly in 2016.
Oh yeah,
he was the savior of the Republic then as well.
And the reason I know he said this is because someone wrote it up on Daily Kos. So I'm like, oh God, okay. Matthew Dowd is now the patron saint of liberalism, and he really gets it, because he's mad about this week and he's mad about it via MSNBC, which is a million times bigger audience than anyone I know ever gets. He's indignant that Republican leaders, because they don't respect their own voters, Blue Gal. Republican leaders don't you get it? They don't respect you at all. They lie to you all the time. And I tell Republicans all the time, these guys lie to you all the time. They don't respect you in any way. And I look back and I go, you know what? Very much like contrasting Rick Wilson today with Rick Wilson yesterday. Let's look back at what Matthew Dowd used to do for a living, which was work with Karl Rove to get George Bush reelected.
Yep.
And there's a long article in Salon from, I think it's 2007 or 2008. I'll put a link up somewhere that I've quoted before, which is Matthew Dowd didn't give a shit about the Republican-based voter, about his focus was on anger points.
Mm-hmm.
His focus was on getting the morons to the polls. His focus was on bundling, loathing, the terrorism threat, now I'm quoting, and conflating all that with the gay menace to get Republicans to the votes, to get abortion second, gun control was third, but gay marriage was the one that he made a fucking issue out of.
Yeah.
And once he had won the election for George Bush, he was ecstatic. He was celebrating. He went out in public and talked about how it doesn't matter in presidential politics. Issues don't matter. It's your brand that matters. Facts don't matter. Only the brand. In other words, Republican-based voters are idiots. And if you can get them pissed off about some imaginary bullshit, they'll vote for my guy. And that's a good thing. That's my whole fucking strategy. That's me and Karl Rove's whole strategy to get George Bush elected. Now jump ahead from 2004, 2005, 2021. Suddenly, Matthew Dowd is all worked up over the fact that Republican leaders don't respect their voters. They tell them bullshit. They tell them lies. They make shit up just to get them to the polls. And that should anger you. Like, dude, I would accept the fact that if you fell off the turnip truck yesterday and just noticed this today, man, that's a revelation. You should be celebrated for that. But you are the guy who helped make the base this way. This was your fucking strategy. You were so proud of it. You talked about it in public. And to jump ahead a decade and suddenly act all shocked that the Republican leadership lies to the base to get them to vote for horrible shit that the base is actually bad for them, to lie to people and say this is a shocking development that I never saw coming. This is, again, the weirdness in the way that they talk about the Republican base, as if they were innocent in all of this. As if, again, the problem with the base is they're being condescended to by Democrats, or the facts are being hidden from them by Fox News, or that they're being disrespected by the leadership. And all of that is wrong. All of that is wrong. The Republican base are a bunch of reprogrammable morons and racists and paranoid assholes.
And so get to the Washington Post piece, Driftglass.
And so the Washington Post gets this almost exactly right. I'll do 2 paragraphs, then I'm done. That's one of the ironies here. Republicans who never bothered to read anything about critical race theory say falsely that it, quote, reduces every American, no matter their character or creed, to their racial identity alone. And that's Josh Hawley saying that. Yet the whole point of their campaign is to convince white people that they're oppressed because of their whiteness. Second paragraph. As we see so often, elite Republicans operate from the presumption that their supporters are easily manipulated rubes who can be worked into a frenzy by just about anything. And it's hard to argue that they're wrong.
Yeah, because they'll invade a school board meeting in Virginia and get violent over critical race theory. Which isn't taught in the public schools in Virginia.
They'll cheer for the invasion of the wrong country.
Right.
Because George Bush told them, Saddam Hussein and gays want to make your kids give up their guns or something.
Yeah, right.
But at the end of the day, it's this radical avoidance of talking about the obvious fact that the Republican base are reprogrammable idiots and racists and lunatics and rage-drunk white people. And they are this way because Republicans made them this way. They built them this way. But
Driftglass.
Yes.
Driftglass, that fucking works.
It does. That's the point.
That's what makes me so furious right now.
Yep.
Because we lost this week. We lost to Republicans.
We did.
Who blockaded, who filibustered, who would not debate the For the People Act, would not debate voting rights. And so it stopped. It just stopped cold. And I'm tired of this shit. I'm just going to tell you, I'm tired of it. I'm exhausted by the fact that an old white Republican in the U.S. Senate can hold up his pinky finger, and that stops progress. And it leads to the question, is anger the only thing that works? Because we won 40 seats in the House in 2018.
We did.
Because people were furious over the threat to their health insurance. And I'm not over that yet. I've said this week, this this 2-track compromise deal where we're going to let Republicans vote for roads and bridges, but we're still going to get at-home health care for seniors and pre-K for children, which is the pre-K for children part of it. Marsha fucking Blackburn is trying to convince her voters that this is communist, indoctrination of our youth. Every single one of her goddamn grandchildren went to fucking preschool. And I'm just to the point with her. But I just wonder, I mean, here I am all mad now, and I'm ready to go out and register voters. I love what one guy on Twitter said. He said, now that we've, set aside this possible way of resolving the voter crisis in this country where Republicans are trying to take the vote away from people, it's now hand-to-hand combat. Right. It's now one state at a time, one district at a time, one voting precinct at a time. It's get out the vote and register, get out the vote and register. And thank God we have a Democratic administration, where, say what you want about Merrick Garland and him being a traditionalist. He's a traditionalist for the constitutional right to vote.
Yes.
And he's expanding the civil rights division. And he's suing the state of Georgia.
Yes, he is.
Starting with the state of Georgia is symbolic. Don't think it isn't.
Yeah.
He's going to move on to Texas and Ohio and other places. But he's starting with Georgia because there's a Senate race in Georgia before the 2022 election. And time is of the essence. As someone, I don't know if it was someone from Texas, but someone last night was talking about, we can overturn these draconian laws against voting, but there might be 1 or 2 elections between now and the time we're able to overturn it. And elections happen under bad law.
Yes, they do.
So starting with Georgia is important because that's when the next Senate election is. But I've been wondering this week with my fury over this, being mad at Mitch McConnell, and go to hell Mitch was trending, and I'm glad I'm not alone.
No, you're definitely not.
Is anger the only thing that works? Is that the only thing that gets voters out? Is that the only thing that turns the tide? Because when I was younger, I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want to believe that anger was the only force for social change in this country. But it seems like it is. And making people angry, even if it's something imaginary, seems to be the only thing that gets Americans to give a damn en masse. I mean, I'm not talking about the listeners of this podcast who I know are activists.
Right.
And I'm not coddling you by saying that. You're listening to us talk every week and so forth. This week I had to do battle again. This is another battle that I've had. Those of you who've listened to this podcast for years know has been a frequent battle in my life of having to get ADHD medication for my kid.
Right. And
he's an adult now, but he is between doctors. He's between insurance companies. He's not covered, but he will be moving this summer from one insurance company to another.
Right. He's between pharmacies.
He's in between pharmacies. He's moved back home. He's not at campus anymore. And getting his prescription filled this week, I took it on myself to help him with that. And you watched me do this. And it was phone call after phone call after phone call. And I finally, Tuesday afternoon, just threw up my hands and said, okay. And I went and figured out how to fax people on my computer.
Faxes are impressive.
Well, faxes sit on somebody's desk and have to be acted on that
yes,
day.
They do.
And I know how those medical bureaucracies work because I've had to deal with it dozens and dozens of times. And you send a fax to a nurse and she's got to do something with it.
Right.
It's her job.
Less thermal paper.
Right. So, and pharmacies deal with faxes, and faxes usually come from doctors' offices, and they have to be dealt with that day as well. So I'm writing this fax, and I included, I'm sure Junior would be very upset with me for saying this, but on the fax I said, it's easier to get a joint for my son than it is to get a legitimate ADHD prescription filled.
Right.
And so much of the problem I was having was nurses on Friday afternoon being on autopilot, and there were already refills at the campus pharmacy which is 3 hours away. I could have driven there and gotten it.
Well, and that's right? Important to underscore is this is not a brand new thing. This is a refill of a long-standing prescription.
Since he was in grade school.
Right.
But because it's a controlled substance and because it needs a paper prescription and, like I said, you and I know that there is a state senator who's now working in the governor's office that I'm going to turn to
Yes.
and write him a letter. And,
yes, indeed.
But I hate being that Karen. I hate being that white privileged woman. But that's the problem. Look, I have 2 master's degrees. I have experience as an IT help desk person. I know how to fax from a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I have a printer in my office. I have high-speed internet in my home. I know how to file taxes myself. I have the Duke Nukem arsenal of resources and skills to get this done, to deal with bureaucracy. And I know I told the story before of when I was newly divorced and poor and I was eligible for home heating assistance. That's how poor I was.
Mm-hmm.
And going into that stinky office with a file folder, it had my kids' social security numbers. I had a copy of my divorce decree that they could keep, that I'd made a photocopy of.
Mm-hmm.
I had, my last 3 power bills. I had everything lined up. And the bureaucrat there, bless them for helping people be able to pay their home heating bill.
That's right.
But I said to them at the end of the meeting when they had helped me, I said, I hope every other client you have today is this easy. And they just rolled their eyes back in their head, because most of the people they deal with all day are people whose power has been turned off because they were paralyzed by the inability to deal with bills and bureaucracy and money and checking accounts and.
Right.
And whether that's because of structural racism or lack of education or intellectual disability or just paralysis of being poor, which is a big one.
Yeah, being poor is a full-time job.
Being poor is a fucking full-time job. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was dealing with this and faxing, and sure enough, you send a fax to each pharmacy in the doctor's office. All 3 of them called me back that day.
We're going to take care of this right away.
Mrs. Langham, we're going to take care of this right away. And they did.
Mm-hmm.
But it shouldn't be so fucking hard, Driftglass.
No.
And the skills that you and I have and that people out there have is, Stacey Abrams has massive intelligence and massive skills and has people following her. And it's still so fucking hard.
Right.
And it shouldn't be this fucking hard.
And still, some old white racist in the Senate can raise his pinky finger and stop everything.
Stop everything.
Stop everything. And no matter what you do, no matter how clever you are, no matter how many skills you have, no matter how right you are, no matter how righteous you are, no matter how many facts you pile at his door, no matter how much you plead for mercy or reason or just decency.
Yeah.
He raises his pinky finger. Hey, not his pinky finger. He raises his middle finger and says, fuck you. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if your whole family dies. I win because I have rigged the system so that I cannot lose. And I have an army of angry morons who will storm the fucking Capitol and state capitals if they don't get what they want. Well, what do they want? They want to see you cry.
They will kiss their children goodbye that morning, knowing they might die in service of their country.
Yeah.
To invade the Capitol because their guy didn't win.
And let's remember, 160 years ago, wealthy American racists who had political power made war on this country because they lost an election.
Yeah.
That is not something that's something that's sort of lost in the history of the Civil War. It's because they lost an election. So let's burn the country down. Let's separate
there goes
from the country.
Driftglass teaching critical race theory again.
I know. I'm a bad man. I'm a very bad person.
Anyway, thank you everyone for listening to my rant.
Well, and I've used this analogy before under different circumstances. This is like entering a black hole. There is an event horizon. There's a point at which you can no longer escape the gravity. We can go on for 3 or 4 more election cycles not noticing that our democracy has ceased to exist.
Yeah.
But once we have given it up, once Republicans have stolen it and broken it and stand guard over its corpse, armed to the teeth with the courts on their side, and say you're never going to get this back, it's too late.
Yeah.
And this election is that moment.
Yeah.
And the idea that we have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting against what are essentially inferior, stupid, awful, shitty, evil people who want nothing more than, they don't want anything out of this but to see you cry.
Right.
That's all they want.
They don't believe in anything. I mean, we learned that from Laura Ingraham this week. She doesn't believe in anything.
No.
She wants power to determine how to punish people that said something she didn't like.
There's a quote from Tombstone. I'm sorry to do this to everyone. trying to explain Johnny Ringo. What does he want? What is he there's a hole in his heart. There's a hole in his life. Nothing, and no amount of money or women or killing is going to fill it. And what does he want? He wants revenge. Revenge for what? Revenge for being born. The people we're talking about hate existence in this world. They feel oppressed by it. They feel like they're losers. They feel like the world is against them. And they hate everything about this country. They hate the plurality of it, and the joy of it, and the fact that people who should shut their mouth have a say in things, and people who are on the bottom now have equal power to them, sometimes even more. They hate all of that. And they just want to make those people suffer. And that's why they will vote for Mitch McConnell until the day they keel over dead. And that's why the fight just never fucking stops. And this leads me to my other on-again, off-again war, if you will, against certain words being used in the media. And the words that caught my attention this week were admit and expose. It's a little thing, I admit, but it drives me crazy. Lawrence O'Donnell this week on the MSNBC network said that filibustering Joe Manchin's compromise, because Joe Manchin said, well, you know what? We'll just get rid of a bunch of stuff Republicans don't like and I'll have a compromise, which Mitch McConnell immediately shit on. And Lawrence O'Donnell said that compromise or whatever it was exposed the fact Republicans are just obstructive assholes who never intended to act in good faith. And columnist Catherine Rampell referred to the same process as getting the GOP to admit that their election fraud concerns are all bullshit. And I've said this before on this podcast. The question you should ask yourself when you hear words like that is admit to whom? Expose to whom? Who out there doesn't know this is what the GOP is like? There's built into this assumption that, finally it's exposed, the GOP argues in bad faith. Well, what? There's one guy left in one Ohio diner who's still on the fence. It's like, I don't want to vote for the fascist party full of racists who've destroyed my country, but critical race theory. So I'm really I don't know what to do. No, that person is either an idiot, clearly a coward, and probably a Republican who just doesn't want to admit it to pollsters.
Right.
And the idea that if you could just show them one more example, if you can just give them one more, fireworks, if you could just shine a light on one more dark corner where Mitch McConnell is sitting there smirking and flipping you off, standing over the corpse of democracy. But this idiot in an Ohio diner will go, you know what? I guess I'm going to vote for the Democrats. I don't like critical race theory. Don't know what it is, but I hear it's bad. But I'll vote. There is no such person.
No.
Anyone who's a centrist at this point.
And no one in QAnon wants bipartisanship.
No, of course not. Go all the way back to Gingrich and Limbaugh in the 90s, telling these same people when they all had full heads of hair and were all smoking cigars in rush rooms, never compromise with lefties. Lefties are libtards, are monsters. They're socialists. They're communists. They're
baby
Marxists.
Killers. They're anti-family.
You should never compromise
with
them. Never give them anything. We should keep a few of them on campus or in laboratories as samples for future generations.
That's what Limbaugh said.
That's what Limbaugh said. This was in the 90s. If you didn't understand the GOP when they were lining up behind these guys, when this was the language they were using 30 fucking years ago, then don't come to me now with the sudden shock and surprise on your face, unless, as I've said before, you were born literally yesterday, fell off the turnip truck, or you're an AI that suddenly got access to the internet, and now you're learning about stuff. And it's like, oh my God, shit, this is really horrible.
Look at all the porn.
Look at all the porn and cat pictures. The internet's weird. No, but if you're a guy who's been working in Republican politics for your entire adult life, and now you're coming to me going, I don't know if you know this, but the situation's pretty bad, which is why we should lead this. Democrats liberals should shut up and let us show you the way. No. Now I know this message will never penetrate higher than our listenership because nobody wants to hear it. But the fact of the matter is that the only people who've been telling the truth, as ugly as it is, all along, partial and bruised and battered as it is, are liberals. Yeah. And nobody wants to admit that liberals actually knew what we were talking about, that we actually warned all along, and that people should probably at least give us an equal place at the table with Charlie Sykes and
former head of the RNC.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd really be nice.
Hey, Driftglass. Our congressman has been winning awards this week.
You mean Jan Schakowsky?
Rodney Davis.
Oh, Oh,
He's
that's
been
right.
winning awards, Driftglass.
Well, he is an award-winning congressman. What sort
Award-winning
of award?
Well, he won an award this week. We found out in last Sunday's paper.
Yes.
You handed me last Sunday's paper. I looked through it and I
did.
said, did you see this ad, this
Yeah.
half-page ad in the paper for Rodney Davis's award?
Mm-hmm.
You glossed right over that, but
My mind rejected it.
the award was from the Alliance for Patient Access, which had a half-page ad in our local paper to announce that our Congressman, Republican Rodney Davis, had won their prestigious 2021 Champion of Patient Access Award.
Man, that sounds pretty prestigious.
Oh, it's so nice. With the nation slowly recovering from the pandemic, the ad wrote, it is crucial seniors have access to all the Medicare benefits on which they rely. But with some in Congress proposing ideas that are proven to reduce research for new treatments and cures, Congressman Rodney Davis needs to keep up the fight. So call him and thank him for keeping up the fight for patient access to new developments in medicine.
Because some in Congress, we can't say who, because then it would be a political ad as opposed to an award for good service.
Right.
But you know who we're talking about. You know who we're talking about.
Yeah. And it turns out the Alliance for Patient Access, as you used to write in your blog, Driftglass, Google.
Yeah.
I went on a little research trip, and they're funded by 8 or 9 big pharma companies and they're dedicated to stopping Medicare from negotiating drug prices.
Yeah, that's it.
Because, and the big argument always about negotiating drug prices is that's going to stop research and development. And of course, Katie Porter has proven that they're much more interested in stock buybacks and massive CEO compensation than they are in research and development, most of which is done at universities at government expense. So, but they can't give Rodney Davis money for voting the way they want him to against Medicare being able to negotiate drug prices like every other country in the world does. So they give him an award and a half-page ad in the local newspaper of his district.
Yes.
So, Driftglass, Rodney Davis then has won another award that he talked about in his email newsletter.
I heard about this. I heard he won.
The email newsletter that starts off with, the For the People Act is actually the For the Politicians Act. And is a power grab by angry Democrats. That's what it is. So
now deconstruct that sentence. It's not the For the People Act. It's For the Politicians Act. Now, that's really dumb, right? That's real dumb.
It's really dumb.
But you know what? It's just dumb enough so that our neighbors will think, yeah, it is for the politicians. That's right, Rodney Davis. I don't like politicians either. That's
Rodney Davis, four-term Congressman Rodney Davis is not a politician.
I'm not a politician. I really would rather be called a public servant. I have a lot of names for you, Rodney Davis. Public servant is not among them.
Not one of them.
Yeah.
So Rodney Davis's second award, you called it the Shut Up and Do What You're Told award, but that's not what it's called, Driftglass. It's been rebranded by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as the Abraham Lincoln Leadership for America Award.
It has leadership and Lincoln in the title? Well, that's a very important award.
That's a very important award from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, yes. And this is one that Rodney Davis touted on his own newsletter as being, go and read more about how I got this award for bipartisanship and leadership. But the methodology of the award, as indicated on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce website, is that since the start of the 116th Congress, the Chamber has urged members to co-sponsor certain bills and refrain from co-sponsoring others. This award is based on the number of times a member took the recommended actions.
Oh, so this was the Shut Up and Do What You're Told award.
Shut Up and Do What You're Told award, Driftglass.
That's nice.
Now, Rodney Davis, they actually have the scores of the winners at how many times, the percentages that they shut up and did what they were told from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And somebody who has a much higher score than even Rodney Davis, in fact, has a score of 100% from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Kristen Sinema.
Oh, my God. I've heard of her.
Yeah.
I know Kristen Sinema. In fact, I believe I was pitching you earlier today the idea of renaming our cat Bosco Kristen Sinema for a number of...
this cat rubs up against your leg and then bites you.
Yeah, the cat... demands your attention, is thirsty for your attention, will literally block me every time I leave the room, like run in front of me and stop, and run in front of me and stop, and run down the stairs in front of me and stop. So it's desperate for attention. It will stop me at every turn, and then it'll bite me for some reason. And I thought, oh, it's Kristen Cinema.
Renaming Bosco Kristen Cinema. I'm sorry.
So I know that did not go over well with the Congress here in the House, the legislative body here. But I must say,
finally, Driftglass.
Yes.
2 Project Veritas trainees.
I've heard of them too.
Yeah. They decided to own the Libs and try to get some gotcha videos at a Democratic National Committee fundraiser. So the way they did that, the way they got access to the Democratic National Committee fundraiser where they could film these gotcha videos, they bought 2 $10,000 tickets and donated $20,000 to the DNC.
Wow.
In order to get inside the fundraiser to make gotcha videos.
You know what? First of all, that's $20,000 more than I've ever given to the DNC. just to be clear.
Period.
Secondly, for half that in cash, you can come to my house. I'll give you all the gotcha shit you want.
That's right. You can film me putting on my compression socks.
Right. It's cool, man. Come on in. I'll talk shit all day long.
Wonkette. I'm going to read from 3 sentences from Wonkette. Toward that end, these 2 people, Meyer and LaRocca, dropped about $30,000 to buy their way into progressive circles, including donations of $10,000 from each of them to the Democratic National Committee, which got them invites to the Las Vegas Democratic primary debate in February. Whether this money came out of their own pockets is not clear, although it would be really bloody stupid for them to violate campaign finance law using someone else's cash for a political donation. Just ask Lev Parnas. And then I wrote, narrator, they used someone else's cash. But now they are married, and apparently they've decided not to work on behalf of Project Veritas anymore.
They found an honest business?
They've decided to start an ammunition import business out west.
Of course they did.
This story broke in the New York Times today about $20,000 to the DNC, to own the Libs. But one person on Twitter replied to this and said, well, I think both sides do this sort of thing.
Yeah. See.
And I said, as if anyone on the left has $20,000 and would give it to the RNC to expose them, when all we have to do is read Ronna Romney McDaniel's Twitter feed for free.
Yeah. Come on. It's right there. Well, some of us can read it for free. Some of us have to have burner accounts to peek at Ronna McDaniel.
Yeah, all right, you want to talk for a minute about, we're running out of time, a minute about Tucker Carlson.
Well, just there's an article in the New York Times, ironically, about the media is the problem. So, the New York Times, there are parts of the New York Times that does great work. And then there are parts I write about, which are terrible. But this really is, I'll just give you the headline. It's Tucker Carlson calls journalists animals. He's also their best source.
Yeah.
His platform on Fox News made him a big player in Donald Trump's circle. Off camera, he shapes the coverage of Trump's world and Fox's own internal politics. He, on camera, slags people that he then texts and talks to off camera. It's a fucking game. And this actually comes down to something I heard Annie Applebaum talk about on the Bulwark podcast, which was very good. This portion was quite good. I'm not uniformly critical of everything I hear from those folks. Anyway, I heard Annie Applebaum say, sort of how democracies die and what happens and her experience in Poland. And one of them was, the people on the right, especially the people in the media, do they actually believe this shit? And she said, I think, in her opinion, I'm now repeating secondhand, I think Laura Ingraham actually believes this shit. Because Laura Ingraham was on the radio. She was a Reagan girl on the radio. And now she's powerful and popular on television.
Well, she was sending faxes against the Clintons before she was anybody.
But that's the point. Yeah. She used to be nobody, a bit player. Right. Now she has her own show on television. And she has had to reformat her brain from the Ronald Reagan girl to this lunatic who thinks that we should defund the military because they want to study things.
Right.
And just says the craziest, most Orwellian fascist bullshit. And her opinion was she probably believes it. She's a well-educated person. She went to a good school. She knows better. But people who fall down the fascist rat hole, find a way to justify and then embrace the worst, most horrible shit you can imagine. And she does this. On the other hand, Tucker Carlson knows better. He knows it's a game. So he's on camera telling the rubes, kill them all, purge, go out there with machetes, whatever the hell else he's going to say next week.
Calling the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff a pig. And stupid.
And then he'll blow in calls to all of his favorite people and laugh it up and tell them inside dirt. This does remind me of Anna Marie Cox. A couple of years ago, getting all tearful, going, I don't know what happened to my good friend Tucker Carlson. He used to be a guy you used to go out and get drunk with. There's pictures of him and her and like Andrew Sullivan getting drunk at Washington, D.C. bars. These are my pals. Yeah, they're on the other side of the aisle, but what happened to them? And my answer to her is, from afar, I can tell you just by dealing with people like this, nothing happened to them.
Right.
He's always been a hollow careerist scumbag who's willing to hop on whatever bandwagon's going
whatever
past.
Train is going to make him the most money. Right.
And, the people who were like, oh my God, Fox is going to lose Megyn Kelly and replace him with this bow tie guy. Like, no, it won't make any difference. They'll go with him. I remember vividly that moment when Megyn Kelly started falling off the bandwagon, and the staunch Republicans I know in Springfield were like, they're kind of tired of that blonde chick. They were jerking off to her. They thought she was the cat's meow for all the time she was telling them the crazy shit they wanted to hear. But the minute she said, the minute she started rubbing up against Trump the wrong way, she was dead to them. She's just a lib, probably just a Democrat. You know how those people are. And it was like, plug in anybody, plug in any idiot off the street, plug in Tucker Carlson. It doesn't matter who they plug in there as long as they deliver the massive doses of rage porn that these people need every day. So Tucker Carlson just slotted himself in and turned into what they wanted him to be. And now he's off to the races and he's going to have a long career and die wealthy. And he has succeeded in helping destroy the country that gave him everything. And it doesn't bother him at all because it doesn't affect him personally in any way.
Nope. And it turns out that whole story he told about, protesters cracking his door open and threatening his kid was a lie.
It was a lie. Of course it is. Because that's why I don't feel the need to parse or debate anything specifically that I hear from Fox News, because I just say, it's all a lie. Everything coming off of that network is a fucking lie. And so I don't need to, but this one specifically is more lie-ish than this other lie over here. No, it's a state propaganda network, and everything coming out of it is designed to wreck democracy and advance the shareholder value of their corporation. That's it.
Yeah. Before we get to the news roundup, I want to just talk for a minute about Michael Gerson's column this week about structural racism, because it was really good. And that surprised the hell out of both of us.
Yes, it did. It did. I was pleased to see it.
Bush speechwriter Michael Gerson, writing from his own perspective about his white privilege and his childhood in St. Louis and the extent to which his parents and the milieu of the city of St. Louis, quote unquote, protected him by indulging segregation. So I recommend you go and listen. It is, if you Google Michael Gerson structural racism, I think you'll find it.
It was, and he said somewhere in there, I'm not quoting directly, but I didn't create the system, but the system created me.
Right.
And I thought that was a very elegant turn of a phrase.
That
and very
is an
honest.
elegant way to say it. And we both looked for a razor in the apple and we didn't see one. I mean, no. I think he was genuinely talking about something that matters. And he wanted to contribute to that conversation as a white man. And I think he did contribute to that conversation.
This is not, in my opinion, let him off the hook for
everything else. No.
I wrote a long piece called Bonfire of the Sanities, which is a sort of a long, detailed list of all of Michael Gerson's political points over the years. And during the Obama administration, he hated Obama, hated everything about him. Obama's the most divisive president in history.
That divisive thing instead of N-word is hilarious.
He promised to bring the nation together, but all he does is divide. And he just loathed Obama. And for reasons that clearly had nothing to do with anything Obama was actually doing. It was Obama appears divisive to you, Michael, because you are a member of a giant racist shithole party. and you're having a collective freak out. There's a black man in your White House. And he couldn't come to terms with his evangelical faith and his faith in his own self-righteous superiority, and the fact that that's exactly what was going on. And so jump ahead a decade, and he said, this system of structural racism created me, and now I'm seeing exactly how it works. So that is progress. I will give him credit for that.
Yeah, yeah. And I do recommend reading that column, because it was well written and said something that matters.
But get past the paywall, because the whole paper is not worth it.
Drift Class, let's do a news roundup.
Fire away, Blue Gal, whenever you're ready.
President Biden agreed to a bipartisan infrastructure deal after meeting with a group of senators at the White House. We have a deal, Biden said, endorsing the roughly $1 trillion infrastructure plan by a group of 10 senators. Under the framework, the bipartisan package would include about $579 billion in new spending to overhaul the nation's transportation, electric utilities, water, and broadband infrastructure. The Senate, meanwhile, has started to work on a budget resolution that would allow Democrats to pass a second, much larger package of spending and tax increases unilaterally. Chuck Schumer said that the Senate will simultaneously move forward with both the bipartisan agreement and the reconciliation bill. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi told House Democratic leaders that the House won't take up the bipartisan agreement until the Senate approves a package through reconciliation. Holy shit, I missed that part.
Yeah, no,
so the House isn't even going to look at it until the Senate passes the reconciliation. So we're going to get pre-K and senior care in their homes, in at-home senior care. We're going to get that, or the Republicans are going to have billboards in their district saying, "You blocked bridge repair."
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, there'll be enough money in the DNC coffers from all that money.
We got $20,000 extra dollars from two jackasses.
Yeah, that Veritas money is going to buy one billboard somewhere in Arkansas going, "Congratulations, your bridges are falling down because of that asshole over there."
Right.
The Biden administration has extended the national moratorium on evictions to help millions of tenants unable to pay rent payments during the coronavirus pandemic. Extended the 1 full month, is my understanding.
Nearly $10 million. This is really great news. You want to hear some really great news? Here it is. Mm-hmm. Nearly 10 million Americans enrolled in Medicaid during the coronavirus pandemic. Roughly 80 million people are now covered by Medicaid, nearly a quarter of the entire U.S. population. I'm telling you, the fact that the safety net for health insurance worked for 80 million people during a time of tremendous economic downturn is something to just praise Andy Slavitt.
Yeah.
This is it. Hello, is Andy there?
Yeah.
I want to the White House.
I want a statue of him in.
I want a statue of Andy Slavitt in some capital. Yeah, in the U.S. Capitol. Mm-hmm. It's just marvelous. Federal health officials attributed the boost in enrollment to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act approved by Congress in March of 2020. Furthermore, expansion in subsidies under healthcare.gov and the encouragement and the advertising that went into both the CARES Act and the rescue plan definitely increased Medicaid expansion, because people saw, I'm eligible for a free plan when they try to sign up. Mm-hmm. And it's fantastic. That's just great news that people have some healthcare coverage during a time when they're out of work and they don't have to pay for, what is that you used to have to do?
Copay?
No. Used to be when you got fired from a job, you could keep your old insurance
Cobra.
Cobra.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I was on Cobra for a year, and I lost, I basically burned through all my savings keeping myself on Cobra. And it didn't do me any good, because the minute I was going to go to a doctor's office, they were going to disqualify me for a whole bunch of reasons, I was sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was throwing money away. It's a fine stopgap if you have a medical condition that can be resolved in a year and have a whole bunch of extra income to pay for it, and your employer has already given you a really great plan that you're just extending for a year.
It's a shit sandwich is what you're saying. If you have a lot of bread, you don't have to eat a lot of shit. Yeah.
Other than that, right. And telling my grandchildren one day, there was a thing called Cobra. They'll say, "Shut up. I don't want to hear about it. It's no more stories about the bad old days, Grandpa."
We climbed to the doctor in a hill of snow both ways.
We did both ways. The Biden administration will make gender confirmation surgery available to transgender veterans through the Veterans Affairs health coverage. And that is, again, excellent news. Absolutely excellent news.
Attorney General Merrick Garland announced today that the Justice Department will be suing the state of Georgia over its voter suppression and nullification laws. I hope the taxpayers of Georgia are super happy that their tax money is going to go to defending a restriction on their right to vote, because that's what the state attorney general will be defending at your cost.
At your cost, passing the cost along to you. Roughly 900 Secret Service employees have tested positive for the coronavirus since March of 2020. More than half, 477, were responsible for protecting Donald Trump and Mike Pence, as well as their families and other government officials. More than 11% of Secret Service employees were infected.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed legislation requiring the state's public colleges and universities to survey students, faculty, and staff about their political views. As part of this push against the indoctrination of students, DeSantis threatened to cut funding from state universities that he determines don't promote, quote, intellectual diversity, unquote. And actually, it's pretty much unanimity on state college universities that they all hate DeSantis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, any decent human being hates a scumbag like DeSantis. But Florida residents elected him because they want a Orwellian halfwit doing shit like this. Writing laws that say you can mow down protesters with your car. That's DeSantis too. There are rotten people in that party who are thoroughly thrilled that DeSantis is turning into the Joe McCarthy of college. Speaking of shitty governors, Texas Governor Greg Abbott vetoed a bill that requires schools to teach children about domestic violence and child abuse. Abbott also vetoed a bill that would have banned the use of heavy chains to tether dogs outside and leave them without drinkable water, adequate shade, or shelter. Man, hates dogs and children,
Hates dogs, yep. Senate Republicans blocked debate on the For the People Act, an amended version of the voting rights legislation that passed the House in March. The vote to start debate on the voting legislation failed 50-50 on party lines, 10 votes short of the supermajority needed to advance the bill and begin open debate in the Senate. Mitch McConnell called the bill, which would expand early voting, end partisan gerrymandering, make it easier to vote by mail, and make Election Day a federal holiday, a partisan power grab.
To be fair, it is.
His actions are a partisan power grab.
Yes, they are. And hours before the vote, and after weeks of saying he would vote against the election reform bill unless it had bipartisan support, Joe Manchin finally agreed to vote to begin debate on the legislation in a show of unity against the GOP move, saying he reached a compromise with other members of his party to ensure every eligible voter is able to cast their ballot and participate in our great democracy. Republicans, however, were unwilling to even allow debate on voting rights.
Future Arizona one-term Senator Kristen Sinema defended her opposition changing the filibuster in any way, saying, "We will lose much more than we gain," in a convoluted and wildly historically inaccurate op-ed explaining why she chose an arcane, segregation-era Senate ritual over American democracy. Sinema argued that eliminating the legislative filibuster would weaken democracy's guardrails by cementing uncertainty, deepening divisions, and further eroding Americans' confidence in our government. No one understood what the hell she was talking about.
No, but she is Bosco.
Yes.
In 2019, Donald Trump asked his aides to look at what the Justice Department and the FCC could do to punish Saturday Night Live and other late-night shows for mocking him. After watching a rerun of SNL in March of 2019, Trump retweeted that the episode was not funny, no talent, that kept knocking the same person, me, over and over without so much as a mention of the other side. He then asked, should the Federal Election Commission and or FCC look into this? According to people familiar with the matter, Trump then asked advisors and lawyers about what the FCC, the court systems, and the Department of Justice could do to investigate the shows.
The traitor former president, so-called, suggested sending Americans infected with COVID-19 to Guantanamo Bay in an effort to suppress the number of cases on U.S. soil.
And we touched on this briefly, but the full story is this. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff pushed back against suggestions from a Republican congressman that the military was becoming too woke for teaching critical race theory at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. General Mark Milley called the accusations from Representative Michael Waltz offensive, saying that studying institutional racism could be useful in understanding what, quote, caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States during the January 6th insurrection.
Fox News' Tucker Carlson responded by stoking fears of anti-white mania and calling General Milley stupid and a pig, while Fox News' Laura Ingraham called for the defunding of the United States Armed Forces.
No kidding. That happened. Rudy Giuliani has been temporarily barred from practicing law in New York and faces disbarment for making, quote, demonstrably false and misleading statements, unquote, while helping Trump challenge the 2020 election results.
This isn't in our notes, but the Dominion trial for Sidney Powell and others started this week as well. So that happened.
Oh, joy. Rapture.
Yeah. Last month, after Democrats agreed to every Republican demand, Senate Republicans went ahead and blocked the creation of an independent bipartisan commission anyway. So this week, Nancy Pelosi announced the creation of a select committee to examine the January 6th attack on the Capitol. She said this with sadness, but she said it is imperative that we establish the truth of that day and ensure that an attack of that kind cannot happen again.
Yeah.
Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is Bindi. Bindi is a beautiful tortoise shell kitty. We just love those torties. Torties are more diva than the average kitty we hear, and that is definitely true of Bindi.
True.
Which is why Bindi eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve Pet Store Perfection or Dollar Store Dreck, your cats will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh, my Lord, it's freshly poured. And you can visit Bindi at our Facebook page or website, and you can send your Internet Kitty, dog, or any other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, or you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions! Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. #JailToJoy. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job, and it's a labor of love. We got an email this morning from someone who said, I just got notification that my tax refund is coming. And we'll be getting a part of that, apparently, Driftglass. I appreciate that. That's why we have the Gourmet Coffee Guideline. It's when you can afford to support the show, please do.
Mm-hmm.
And know that we really, really do appreciate it.
We do.
Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution. You can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. Our PayPal postal address information is there. All of it's there at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media. And thank you so much for doing that. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Oh, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties are looking forward to hot snack summer.
Those snacks are good in the summertime.
They're good. Cold, hot, room temperature, doesn't matter. But we're going to call it hot snack summer because, hashtag.
Let's think about living.
Cast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2021 DGBG Productions.